I'm Amy Vetter, and welcome to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. This valuable time is for you to pause in your day and go on your own self-journey. Discover the beliefs that are holding you back from living your best life at work and at home. Learn from the guests on this show as they share their inspirational stories on how they found ways to break internal beliefs that were no longer serving them. Because if you believe you can, you will. And our podcast begins now. And now for my mindful moments with my interview with Heather. And hopefully you all enjoyed her story. I thought it was so inspiring and loved hearing about her family background, with her mom pivoting so many times in her career from having a food store to becoming an accountant later in life and then moving on to marine biology. It just shows that we literally can never stop learning. It's our zest for learning and not staying stagnant that helps us to constantly keep our brains working and be innovative. And then talking about her father, who would design and construct restaurants, and how they designed the menu and thought through all of that so that those would be successful, as well as what she learned from her father with her trips over the summer to be with her dad and really learn from him how to live in the outdoors and take risks. So many great stories that you can tell had such an influence on Heather throughout her life. And so she talked about that she really grew up being a dreamer and had this artistic family or just adults that were going after their dreams, which created that herself of wanting to be an actress and really working toward that as she was younger, and found that it was really hard to go through the rejection of being an actress. And looking at her mother and how she had pivoted when things weren't working out with her business, Heather did the same thing and started to go back and really try to find jobs that would give her a more stable life. And that's what really unlocked interest in her that she didn't even know she had. And we really had that discussion on, we can have this perceived notion of what we think we want in life or what our goal is. And, we really just have to constantly be aware of the things that excite us, the things that inspire us or that we take interest in. That I know I find all of the time in my life that there's things that I thought I would never do or never like. And then I try it and I'm like, maybe it is something that I would be interested in doing or never thought of or never pictured that would be something I would do in my life. So I think that lesson of just never closing yourself off from trying new things and really exploring, we're never too old. It's always a time to look at that within ourselves. And so we talked about the fact that she really started uncovering that she had this same interest that our mom did. She really understood databases and how all the numbers work together. And she started working for her mom when she became a pro advisor, and then went back to college so that she could become an accountant and actually become eventually a CPA. And so one of the things that I think was really important there was to just see that she could constantly evolve and have the faith in herself to pivot, to change and go after a new dream, even if it wasn't the original dream. That is all the journey that we go through. And so once her mom sold her practice, she started her own practice and passed the CPA exam, but was missing the education requirement, which I loved that she went back still 15 years later after she did her master's program and was able to still get her license through, even though she didn't do the education requirements at the time. And that's, to me, a big lesson, is that sometimes our dreams get put on hold, or something that we plan for gets put on hold, but it doesn't mean that it has to be the end. It just means that it's on hold for a moment because other life situations come up that might get in the way of it happening just as we planned it. But to always come back to those things that we wanted so badly so that we can accomplish those things and not forget about them. So maybe ask yourself that question from today's interview is, what is it that maybe you put on hold that you want to go back to? And find a way that you can make that realistic in your life today. So maybe it doesn't look exactly the way that it looked when you originally thought about it, but it is something to consider is how do you bring that back into your life? And so I asked her, what are some lessons that she learned from her mom? And one of them was learning to never take anything at face value and always understand the why. And I think for consultants out there, this is a really big thing, is so many times people will come to you as a consultant to tell you what their issues are. But as you question, as you learn, as you get into it, you realize that there's so many layers underneath what that person is actually saying, that to really understand how to help them. And then the other thing that she learned was how to have empathy for your clients and really care about their situation and put yourself in their shoes. And this is really something that in anything, whether you work in a corporation and you have other staff people or coworkers, or you serve other departments, how can you put yourself in their shoes so that you really understand what they're going through on a daily basis and can help them? And I loved her answer about accountants being unsung heroes, that, you know, for so many of us that are accountants, we understand this, but the clients don't see it, that they're getting whatever, you know, final reports or returns or whatever it is that you're finishing up for them, but they don't understand how much time goes into thinking through issues or problems that arise and so forth, because all they see is when they hear or talk to you or get an official report from you. So sharing that with them is so important so that they know that you care and that it matters to them, their well-being. So I thought that was a really good thing to note. And then she talked about her father, of the lesson that she learned from her father of how many risks he made her take, which, you know, she remembers as a kid being terrified. But as she's gone through her adulthood, it's given her the vision, the notion that she can do it, that she's been put in so many situations that were risky, but she can overcome it, that she'll get through it, that she'll survive, because of the many times that she was put in those situations with her father. So I want to thank Heather so much for being on. And, you know, when she ended, she really talked about that we are all stronger and kinder than we think we might be, or that's underneath. And what is important is to really be kind to ourselves over this journey, that sometimes we get hard on ourselves when things don't necessarily work out exactly the way that we had planned. But it is exactly the lessons that we need to learn to become better for ourselves and for the people around us. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, where I'm here with Heather Satterley. And Heather, just love having you on this show. If you don't mind giving our listeners just a brief introduction on who you are, and then we'll get started.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm Heather Satterley. I am a CPA and a technology lover. I have been in accounting for a long, long time, and I think I'm most known to folks as a QuickBooks expert and part of the Intuit training team, and also known for being a Zapier no-code evangelist within our industry. So I've done a lot of different things, worked with a lot of different sizes of firms, but I think I'm an entrepreneur at heart. And I really love working with, other accountants, small businesses, mid-sized businesses, really anybody that's looking to streamline processes, free up their time from mundane data entry, repetitive tasks, and find balance in their life.
Love it. Well, great. I'm so happy for you to be here and to kind of dive into your story. So where I like to start is the beginning. So where did you grow up? What was your family like? and so forth. So start from
Wow.
there.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I don't think anyone's ever asked me that before. So that's really cool. So I grew up, I consider myself a native Rhode Islander, although I'm not truly a
Oh.
native Rhode Islander. So I moved to Rhode Island with my family when I was 8 years old,
Mhm.
from Kentucky. And I've lived here ever since. I've kind of traveled around a little bit, but this has always been home for me. I love New England. I love the ocean. It's beautiful here. So my mom, I grew up in the home of a CPA.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so my mom, when I was a little kid, she was an entrepreneur herself, and she owned a health food store in Louisville, Kentucky. And when we moved to Rhode Island, she had her business. Actually, her store ended up closing, so it failed. I think she ultimately sold it. But what she had said was, "I always wish I had had that advisor that could have helped her business succeed." And so
Mhm.
she decided that that's what she wanted to become. And so when we moved to Rhode Island, she enrolled at University of Rhode Island in their College of Business, and got her master's degree in accounting, and ended up getting her CPA and worked as a CPA when in my teenage years. So I always said, Amy, that I was never going to be an accountant. Never going to be an accountant. I was going to be an actress or movie star, rock star, something, an artist, anything but an accountant. So it's kind of ironic that, and amazing that that's where I ended up.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what about your father?
So my dad, he is, I remember him as a kid as him being a cowboy. So he was actually a restaurateur. And my parents were divorced, by the way. So I have my father and my stepfather. My father was a restaurateur, and so what he would do is he would work with restaurant owners to design their menu, work with the general contractors to build and design the restaurants, and then he would get them up and running, train the staff, get everything going, and then he would move on to his next project. So we spent summers with him. Actually, some of my favorite memories was spending summers with him in Colorado. And he did some really cool things. You know, it was fun to be at the restaurants. But one of the things that he did one summer is he ran an outfitting company up in Grand Lake, Granby and Great Lake, Colorado, on a mountain. And he ran horsebacking trips into the mountains for families and corporations and things. And so we spent that summer on a dude ranch, working with horses. And honestly, it was one of the best summers of my life. So that was
That's
really fun. So,
awesome.
so that's how I think of my dad is, he's an ex-Marine, cowboy. That's my dad.
Wow. And then what did he get remarried?
He got married several times.
Okay.
Actually, he just got remarried, actually, again, I think for the fourth time in June.
Okay. And
Yeah.
then your mom, you said you referenced your stepdad.
Yeah. So my mom remarried when I was young, and he was an artist, and he was actually a steamboat captain. And we moved to Rhode Island because it was always his dream to live here. And then he left his job as a steamboat captain and became a sign painter. So he always was, doodled and did cartoons, and he was really into calligraphy and the art. So they both reinvented themselves when we moved to Rhode Island. It was kind of interesting to see as a kid how you could do that later in life. So,
Yeah.
so anyway, they divorced.
Yeah.
And then my mom fell in love with a marine biologist. And so her last phase was really going out and studying sharks with the love of her life. And they've been doing that for over 30 years now. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, well, not 30 years. That can't be right. Maybe 25 years. But so that they live up in Maine, and they're still studying sharks. It's amazing, and kayaking, and it's really beautiful. My mom will be 80 this year, and she still kayaks regularly and hikes and does all
Oh,
that
very
stuff. So
cool.
she's amazing.
That's awesome. So do you
Yeah,
have siblings?
I do. I
Yeah.
have a sister, Terry, and Terry is an attorney, and she lives in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And she actually is got a little bit of fame to her. So she is a criminal defense attorney who specializes in death penalty cases.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So she actually, when she started her career, she wanted to be a prosecutor. And she had a conversation with an attorney friend of my aunt, and she changed her mind, and she ended up becoming a defender. And so A movie came out in 2020, The Mauritanian. You've heard of that movie? It's about Mohamedou Asalahi, who was a detainee at Guantanamo Bay. And he was arrested after 9/11 and put in Guantanamo. And, he proclaimed his innocence during, the whole ordeal, was imprisoned there for 13 years. And my sister joined an organization called the John Adams Project, which is a group of attorneys that's funded by the ACLU and kind of run by them, that it's named after John Adams because John Adams, as I'm sure you know, was the defender of the redcoats that were responsible for the Boston Massacre. And his ideology was like, as horrible as they are, everybody deserves a fair trial. And so he was very hated for the fact that, he was representing the enemy. So the John Adams project is attorneys that believe in the same ideology. And so they were ones that went in and pro bono defended some of the detainees at Guantanamo Bay. So Mohamedou was eventually released 13 years after he was imprisoned, was found not guilty and sent home. And they made a movie called The Mauritanian, which was released in 2020. And so my sister, Harry, was portrayed by Shailene Woodley, who is the actress that was in the Divergent series. So that was kind of cool to I remember talking to my sister, that's got to be totally wild to actually be portrayed by.
Yeah, it would be weird.
Yeah, I know. And it had an amazing cast. It had Benedict Cumberbatch played the prosecutor. And Jodie Foster played my sister's mentor, Nancy Hollander, who worked with her on that case. So, and she's still friends with Mohamedou.
Really cool.
So anyway, I know this is supposed to be about me, but that's my sister.
No, that's very cool. And also just the kind of picture watching your life, with somebody else portraying it. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So any other siblings or?
Yeah, so I had a brother who passed when he was 20. And then I have a stepsister who lives here in Rhode Island with me and is one of my dearest friends. And then I have a half sister on my dad's side who lives who she was born when I was 21. So there's 21-year difference. And so that's my family. Yeah. Oh, and I have a stepbrother. I can't remember. Sorry, Eric. I have a stepbrother.
Have a village.
We have a village. Yeah, we're majorly the blended family, and it's amazing. And what's really cool about it is everybody gets along, which is so great. Cool. Yeah.
So I'm sorry to hear about your brother.
Thank you.
Definitely a hard thing. I can't imagine. So going back to you saying when you were younger, you don't want to be an accountant. Mm-hmm. So what did you imagine yourself when you grew up?
So I was the dreamer. I was a dreamer. I was an artist. I definitely walked to the beat of my own drum. I wanted to be a movie star. I wanted to be an actress, and I figured that I would be out doing that kind of thing. And I did that for a little while, actually. So I actually did get paid to act. I got $50 for a whole summer. My stint with the Rhode Island Shakespeare Theater. I was very proud of it. But I did a little bit of that, and it was hard. So it's hard because the rejection, you have to be a certain type of person to get rejected over and over and over and over again. And so when I was about 22, 23, I was like, maybe this isn't the right thing for me right now. So I started looking for some other things to do. So I ended up getting a job as an inventory control. I think I was an inventory control clerk. So I counted inventory and then put the inventory into real world software. If you remember real world software.
I do. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That's why I laughed, because it was like the first entry into the cloud.
Right?
Yeah, so, and that was as close as you could get to transfer files through the cloud, and yeah, no one ever remembers them, so.
Yeah, well, that was where I got started, and so I did the inventory thing, and was really good at the computer piece of it, and ended up being a resource for other people in the company when things would go wrong. And I guess that's when I discovered my affinity for technology, and also just understanding the relationships, the relational databases, which really nicely coincides with accounting, right? Double entry accounting, it's all relational. Mm-hmm. So my brain worked that way. So it was kind of like surprise.
So you never knew that about yourself prior?
I never really explored it because I was so
Yeah.
adamant that I wasn't going to be an
Gonna be
accountant.
in-
I wasn't going to sit in an office. I wasn't going to, we were, as a kid of a CPA, you stuff a lot of envelopes and
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
best friend is carbon paper back in the
Yeah.
day, right? Now it's not, but your best friend is
Yeah.
carbon paper. Actually it was your worst enemy was carbon paper.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, so I think that it was just like I didn't understand how somebody could be fulfilled at working all these hours and, working with numbers. It just seemed really boring to me as a kid. And then once I actually started doing it, I was like, this is actually really interesting and fun. Plus, you're working with these businesses. So, like, you're working with jewelry designers and contractors and, college professors and, everyone,
Right.
and so you're hearing tons of stories and learning about different industries and discovering other people's passions and things that you never knew about. So it was
Right.
fascinating and super, interesting and I was good at it. And so
Yes.
that was good. It was like all of a sudden I'm not being rejected, which
Yeah.
was really nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then what did you do from there?
So I had a baby. I
Hmm.
had a baby and ended up
Well, we
going to
kind of skipped over that. So,
we did. So that kind of coincided with the ending of the acting career. The baby kind of was part of that whole decision.
okay. Were you married or?
Nope. Nope, I
Okay.
wasn't married. I didn't think I was pretty sure it wasn't going to work out. So I was like, we'll just do this on our own. And we're great friends. And, we've done a great job of co-parenting.
Yeah.
I also have I have I have three other children. Because I got married later in life. And I'm jumping ahead, so I'll stay on my path here. So I raised my daughter, Chloe, my oldest daughter, by myself until she was 5. And then I met my husband. And so we got married when she was 7. And then we had a couple of kids together. And I have a beautiful, amazing stepdaughter, Megan, who actually works with me. So she's part
Oh,
of
okay.
the company. So she's dipping her toe into accounting, which is
Yes.
awesome.
Yeah.
So
Okay. So you're seeing that you like the database work
yeah,
and working with software. So you had a baby and now you're going to be a single mom.
yep.
So were you looking for stability?
Totally looking for
Yeah.
stability. I'm like, how can I do this? I know real world software. I know inventory. What can I do? And so I reached out to a temp agency to get some work and they were like, wow, this is a skill that people really want. And they found me a position for a manufacturer that was using real world and wanted to implement their inventory module. So that was actually my first implementation
Hmm.
was before I even had an accounting degree. It was just based on the knowledge that I had gotten from this other position. And it was great. I really loved it. Um, After that, I went to work for mom. So I was a bookkeeper for a company for a little bit. And then mom said, Intuit just rolled out this cool program called the Pro Advisor program. And I think you should learn it because you're really good at software and you're really good at working with people. So why don't you come work for me and, I'll pay you and you can become a pro advisor and we'll work together. And so that happened. And then I worked for her for a little bit, enrolled in at URI in their accounting program and ended up getting my accounting degree.
Wow. So
Yeah,
you went to college then again later.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I graduated, I think I graduated when I was 31.
Good for you.
I want to say that's right. And
Mhm.
yeah, it was good. And school wasn't really my thing early on, but I rocked college, man. I
Well,
did.
and I think that's I've got which you're experiencing too, but college age kids and so many people and our generation are like that. And I had, the kids are all trying to figure out what they want to do. And I had heard this podcast with Brene Brown, which I was telling them the other day, where she told her daughter, you're not allowed to pick a major your freshman year. You just pick any class that you want to be on and whatever interests you and so forth. And so one of the things that we've been talking about with, so many of like my kids and my friends' kids is really about, what is it that you want to do when you grow up, and everyone feeling like they need to make this decision at 17, 18 years old, which is really hard because you've had no life experience. And so I was listening to this podcast with Brene Brown, and she was basically saying that she told her daughter, do not pick a major your first year in college, your job is to take every class that is of interest to you without any intention with that. And after the first year, kind of look at what were the things that most interested you. And that's the thing, like, for so many, we kind of get boxed into what we think we're going to be, and not even try to see if we're good at other things and so forth. And it's just it's such an important part of the journey. And I think I talk to a lot of college students as well, and there's so much that you do in accounting besides what you think an accountant does.
Mm-hmm.
And you have no idea when you're starting out. You can think it's the most boring work in the world, and then you get in and you're like, all of a sudden your eyes open, and there's a whole software side to it. There's blockchain, there's all sorts of different areas, supply chain, you name it. And that's what makes it exciting, is you can pivot without losing your experience.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And I remember, it's funny that you said that about college, because I remember my mother telling me when I went off to college the first time. So that was way at the beginning, she's like, college is a buffet. She's like, she told me the same thing. She's like, don't pick a major. She's like, it's like a buffet. And she's like, you go and you try a little bit of philosophy, a little bit of business, a little bit of math, and you figure out what interests you. And then you figure it out. And honestly, Amy, I think that even when you do that, your life changes. You're not the same person
No.
that you were when you turn 18 and you embark on your life journey, right? You evolve over time. And I think that's something that we as people, as humans, need to understand, is that we're constantly growing and changing. And you're right, the accounting industry is so awesome for that, because there's so many different facets to it, and it's constantly changing.
Yeah.
So 100%.
Well, and just like in your life, you could go and be paid $50 for the summer to be an actress, versus once you have a baby, you're like, need a salary. I need something.
Exactly.
Need something a little more secure here. So I got to try new things, and it kind of forces you to really evaluate things in your life. When we have those pivots, and that's what I like to call them. It's a pivot. It's not necessarily giving up on anything, because I'm sure some of those skills as an actress, like especially when you talk about learning how to deal with rejection, that's sales.
It is. Yeah, 100%, 100%. Yeah. It's interesting too, because accountants, I hear this all the time, and I used to say it all the time, that I was horrible at sales. Or I used to say, I'm horrible at sales. I'm horrible at sales. This is not my thing. And that wasn't true.
No.
It wasn't that I was horrible at sales. It was that sales made me really uncomfortable.
Right.
And so it wasn't that I didn't perform it well, because I usually did. Did, if I wanted the client, I could usually sign them. And so I did a good job at that, but it really made me uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's learning how to work through that uncomfortable piece without blaming the outside world for the fact that you're uncomfortable. Because,
right.
That's usually like what we do when we're in those moments. But when you can go back and see, like, even through your journey so far of what we've talked about, of how many times you had to recreate a life by moving or having family changes or new siblings or whatever it is, you start gaining confidence in yourself of, okay, like I can figure out how to navigate stuff. Don't know what that is. But you have to pull on that in order to make change and to pivot things in your life.
Absolutely. I actually was just on Facebook this morning, and somebody posted a meme. And it was actually beautiful. And it was a story of a mother that was talking to, or actually the story was given from the point of view of a child, a grown child that was watching her mother's actions. And the mother was, all of a sudden, when somebody would come to her and ask, something would go wrong, that the mother would be like, well, you need to figure this out. I understand. I hear you, and you need to go figure this out. And the child was saying, that's not my mother. My mother was always the one that was like micromanaging and like in my business and doing all this stuff. And so like the family had an intervention, because she was doing this for several weeks, and they're like, what's wrong with you? Are you depressed? Is something around? And she's like, no. She's like, I had this epiphany that this is your journey and it's not my problem to solve. And if I don't just support you and stop putting myself in the middle of your stuff and
Hmm.
support you can't grow.
Right.
She's like, and she said, I realized that, and I had to make a change in myself. And that just so resonated with me, because that is, as a parent, one of the hardest lessons to learn. But when you learn it, it's actually one of the most beautiful ones, because then you
Right.
start to see your children transform. And, sometimes there's times where you're just crying with them. And
Right.
sometimes there's times where you're celebrating because they actually work through the problem and they make a breakthrough, and it's beautiful.
Right.
But that is something that, at this time in our life, right,
Yes.
where we're learning to let go.
Absolutely. And, even like, I think your mom's and your story, she had to let you go down the path of being an actress so that you never looked back and said, shoulda, coulda, where you actually could play that out, and then was there to help support you when you came back toward her.
Right. Right.
But you also saw your mom do that, where she changed careers around the same age, and became an accountant as well. So it's kind of interesting, the parallel.
It's amazing. I was just, my mom, when she ended up selling her practice, early in the thousands, the 2000s, she went off to be the marine biologist. And I remember I was talking to her recently, and she was saying, even if you choose at this time in life to do something else and pursue something else, she's like,
Yeah.
never give up your CPA license. She's like, that
Right.
was the biggest mistake I ever made. She's like, I left and I went, and started this new path. And then all of a sudden I was like, she missed it. She's like, and I realized I could do this at any time. I could pick it up
Right.
and start, helping
That sounds
clients.
great. Yeah.
And she said, but I let my license lapse. And she said, then I had to go and try and get it again. So she's still, she's be 80 in January, and she still does all her CPE. She still maintains her license. She still, stays abreast of everything in the industry, because she really has such a love for it. And she understands the incredible value
Right.
of being a CPA and what that means. And the fact that that's something that she's worked hard for, and that really, really means something.
Yeah. So, I'm assuming you stayed with your mom through her sale of her business,
I
or
did.
okay.
I did.
And
Um, yeah, I did. I ended up doing, I think the final year of college, when she was going through the sale, I ended up doing an internship at another firm. So I wanted to see what audit was like, because I thought I'd love audit, and I actually hated audit, but I thought I would love it.
right.
Um, and it was miserable to me. I didn't enjoy it at all. But yeah, I did stick with her, and then we've worked together on and off throughout the years, where I pull her into into a project where she has expertise. And she does a lot of not-for-profit work, and so sometimes we'll get on a call and talk QuickBooks. So it's nice to have that in common with her, for sure.
So did you start your own practice after the audit job, or
So I did. So that's exactly what happened. Is I was working for a firm, I did the audit, and I had actually gone to tax, and then I realized I don't want to work in a firm. I don't want to be in a big firm. And so I went back into private for a little bit. And then in private, I went in, they're like, we need you to set up our entire system and HR and do everything. And I did it in like 6 months, and then I was bored out of my mind.
yeah, I
It was
know.
like I set up everything. Everything's like now working
You're
like
like, now
clockwork. And I'm
what?
like, now what do I do? Like,
Yeah.
so yeah, so I ended up at that point is when I decided to go out and start my own firm. But I didn't get my CPA back after I graduated from URI in 2003. And I didn't get my CPA. I took the exam. I took the exam right after college, because my professors were like, do it now, because
Right.
you're going to remember all this stuff. And if you try to take it later, you'll have to redo it, right? You'll have to relearn everything. So I took the exam and passed. But the education hour requirements um, changed the year before, or I think it was actually 2 years before I graduated. So I missed it. And so it went from 120 to 150. And so I just, I actually got married while I was in school and had my second child. And so I was like, I'm not going to go back. I'm like, I don't need it. I can have a career without the CPA. And, but I did pass the exam. And so I ended up getting my EA so that I could practice with
Mhm.
the IRS. And I started my firm, and I ended up doing that for a long time. And then in 2017, 18, who knows, somewhere around there, I got an email, or somebody reached out to me from Northeastern University, and they had just started this brand new master's program. It was a master's in innovation. And I read the description of the program. I'm like, this sounds so cool. And so I signed up for it, and I graduated in 2019 with my master's in innovation. I'm like, wait a minute, like I can be a CPA now. Like I have all the hours. Like I worked at I worked at CPA firms. I'm like, I have the education now. I passed the exam. I'm like, so I reached out to the Rhode Island board, and I'm like I did this like 15 years ago. Like, yeah. So I got my CPA in
Oh
20.
wow, they still grandfathered it in. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I guess if once you pass, you don't lose it. At least in the state of Rhode Island, you don't
That's
lose
awesome.
that exam. And I had to go back to my CPA firms that I had worked for and have them uh
Sign
put
off.
in my attestation of hours, which was an issue. But then yeah, ended up getting my CPA.
Good for you.
Yeah, I was 50.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So I'm actually a fledgling CPA.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I do get that because as I've pivoted in my career, I've never let my license go either because I just it's one of those things that you work so hard for, and for me, I did not pass on the first time, and I do tell college students that all the time because it is not an easy thing, and no one ever asks how many times you took it. It's just you're a CPA.
Right.
But
Right.
I honestly think I would have done better with work experience under my belt before I took the test because I'm one of those people that's application and all the theory of school just was like, I don't get what they're trying to say. Like, I don't get what they're
Right.
trying to do until I actually audited. I was like, oh, now I understand what those books were saying. But it's like too much theory for me. Like, I'm not a theory person
Yeah. And I went into school after I had had
with
practical
work experience.
application.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
You
I
understood.
went in with a different lens. And so
Yeah.
school was probably, I mean, everything, it was almost like on every course was like unlocking like the
You're like,
why.
ah,
That's
that's
why
why
I
we
did
did
that. And I
that.
and I remember
That's
having an argument with my audit professor.
funny.
And this may be the reason I really don't like it. I remember having an argument with my audit professor because I was pregnant with my second daughter in his course, which I'm sorry. I'm sorry, professor. It was
Yeah.
probably his pain in the behind. But one of the things that we had to do every week is we had to memorize the audit standards, word for word, punctuation included, and was pass or fail. So if you didn't get it exactly right, then
Oh
you
my
failed.
God, I would do so bad at that.
And I did. So first of all, I'm ADHD. So for
Yeah.
me, although I did memorize lines when I was an actress somehow,
Oh yeah.
but so I did have those
Yeah.
skills. But I remember one day I was trying to remember it, and I was like, I can't remember if there's a comma or not, or whatever it was. And I ended up writing instead of the standard. I ended up writing him a note. I was like, Professor, I'm like, with all due respect, I think this is the biggest waste of my
You
time
could go look this up.
and your time. I was
Yeah.
like, this is a ridiculous. This is like an exercise in futility.
Right.
And I'm really offended by it. And he wrote
Yeah.
back, and I got an F, of course. But he wrote back and he's like, when you pass the CPA exam, you can tell me how to teach my class. And I was like,
Ooh.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like, ooh. And I really, after I passed the CPA exam, I was like, I reached
Should we go
out.
back? Isn't it amazing the things that stick with you?
Right?
Yeah, like you're like in the moment of glory of the CPA exam, what are you thinking about? That professor.
That was what I was thinking about.
Yeah.
Like, now I can tell him how to teach a class.
You're like, okay, now I can.
Right. You need to stop doing that because it's not nice. But yeah, no, it was, I think we had to memorize the letters too. Like it was brutal. And I think that's probably why I decided audit wasn't for me, because that class was so brutal.
Yeah.
But
Well, and I think what I took from audit, because what I really liked, I did external audit, coming out of school, but that's the thing, like when you're in school, it's like everyone's like talking to you about what you should do or what you shouldn't do. And everyone was like, don't be an internal audit. You should be an external audit. And my next job was internal audit, and I loved that because it was like much more operational. And I worked for Ryder Logistics in Miami, and I mean, as nerdy as it is, went into all these different warehouses, and I'm like, oh, this is so cool, because like I started learning best practices and how they could really set it up better. And also that was when I started in bigger software applications as well, of learning those and being like, oh, this is really cool, like what you can get out of it, like all those things that you just weren't close enough with external audit. And ran what they call client advisory services now. At the time it wasn't a thing when I opened that practice, but really was based on my audit skills, of the things that I did. It's just that people now wanted to hear my recommendation because I wasn't the auditor.
Right.
When you're the auditor, they're like, please don't give us a point. I don't want to hear it, or whatever. They're afraid of anything you come up with, but you're really just trying to help them. And so I drew upon those skills a lot as a consultant, because you understand business process, internal controls, all of those things that help the infrastructure of a business, which is really cool when you can pull from that. But it's also understanding, as you pivot through your career, what things that might seem boring actually help you in the long run. It's like you have to like do the math before the calculator. You have to understand, like when you're looking at a software application, how does it tick? How does information flow in order to be able to help somebody? So that's what I like, is the puzzle, and that's what you kind of start learning about yourself. You're not a maintenance person, but you can go in and undo, fix puzzles.
Right. You can find the anomalies. You can find like the data outliers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
it's interesting. Yeah.
Go
100%.
ahead. Yeah. What were you
No, I was just going to say that I had a tax professor when you were talking about, figuring out the math before you use a calculator. I had a tax professor, and he's still at URI, from what I understand. And, we did have tax software back in when I was there, but we weren't allowed to use it. We actually had to do a return for our final exam by hand. And it was a complicated return. He still does that.
Yeah.
And I love that. Like he's still, and I don't know if that's common practice, but I know in his tax class, I was just talking to a recent grad, and they're like, oh, we had to do it by hand.
But it's so important, those
it's so important.
Things, that's more important than learning punctuation and, memorizing a standard versus, something where you're going to have to understand why you're doing what you're doing, which is cool. So, so with that, with your practice and everything, how did you, when you look at yourself as an entrepreneur and growing over time, what kind of lessons do you think you drew from watching your mom and her practice?
Wow. I mean, my mom, the things that I really learned from my mom is I learned how to tick and tie. Mm-hmm. I learned never to take everything at face value, to always dig deeper. I learned that you have to, she was big on really understanding the why and understanding the situation. So, I think, and then empathy with the client was a huge one. So my mom really cared about her clients, really, really cared about her clients. And I don't want to say to a fault, because I don't think it is a fault at all, but to her own, I guess she put her clients first. And so I just remember her meeting with clients and having conversations with her and listening to, she felt their pain and she wanted to help them. And so that was something that was really magical to me. And I think that's something that gets lost on, the general population is, do you really understand how much your client cares about you?
Yeah.
Or how much your accountant cares about you.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I think that clients don't quite understand that sometimes when they're going through something tough, that we stay up at night, that we can't sleep because we're worried about them and we're trying to help
figure out how to fix it. Yeah.
And so I see accountants as the, unsung heroes for sure. A lot of the stuff that we do for our clients, they're not even aware of. And I think that one of the things I wish for my mom is, I know she always valued her intelligence and her integrity, and I wish she had valued the impact that she had on her clients. And I don't know if that's not the right word. Value is not the right word. I wish she understood the impact that she had on our clients, and how special that was. And so I've always aspired to follow that and really, really, that's always been part of my DNA, is the only way to explain it. And I definitely get that from my mom.
Yeah. So from your creative side, your artistic side, your father being on a dude ranch and a cowboy, what do you think? How do you pull that side of yourself into your business and your career?
That's interesting. I've actually thought a lot about that. So my dad was the guy that threw us into the deep end of the pool to teach us to swim.
Yeah.
So that was my dad. And I hated it. As a kid, I remember him taking us on whitewater rafting trip. And it started by like, if you fall out of the boat, make sure that you go feet first so that you don't, die. And so that was like our life with dad. Like, and so it was terrifying as a child.
Right.
That was absolutely terrifying. And and why is he putting us through this? Woe is me. Why are we backpacking through the mountains? Why can't I just stop and sit down? And he pushed us and pushed us and pushed us. And I hated it. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I was like, oh, we're going to dad's. I loved, I loved being there. I loved the mountains. I loved, where we were, but I remember being terrified a lot of the time. But what that taught me is, as I got older, was that as hard as something looks, you just got to keep pushing through it. And so, it's funny. I I went to the AICPA Engage in Las Vegas this year, and one of my biggest fears is heights. I'm terrified of heights.
Oh,
Like,
I was there.
yeah, you were there. You were there.
Yeah, that's right. I can't believe you
Terrified
did
of
that.
heights.
Yeah.
Yeah, terrified of heights. And the opportunity arose for me to jump off a 160-story building and
Yes.
rappel down. Basically, you don't jump, freestyle, but you rappel down. And
Yeah.
I'm sitting there going, the opportunity came up, and I'm like, when am I ever going to have the chance to do that again? Yes, it's absolutely terrifying. But if I do this, that's going to be something that will be really meaningful to me as a human, because I'll be like, I jumped off a 160-story building. If I can actually get myself to step off the platform, and not die, this will be a big thing for me. And so, as I was standing there, and they were doing the triple check and this and that, and I'm like, what am I doing? What am I doing? I thought about my dad. And I thought about the fact that, I probably wouldn't have been able to step off that platform and actually do it had he not put me through those experiences as a child, because I survived all those experiences where I was pretty certain I was going to die.
You're right.
And so I think that he definitely instilled in me an ability to face my fears and push through it. So I really thank him for that. I didn't appreciate it growing up at all. And it took me probably 30 years to actually forgive him for some of that.
Yeah.
But at where I am in life and looking at it now, it's amazing how, you don't quite understand why your parents are teaching you certain things until later in life, when you realize that, wow. So yeah.
Yeah, very cool. So to wrap up, I like to just ask some rapid fire questions. So pick a category: family and friends, money, spiritual, or health.
Oh, let's see. Gosh, that's a hard pick. All right, I'm gonna pick health.
Okay. Things or actions that I don't have that I want.
Things I'd like to be more consistent in my exercise regime. So I'm one of those that I start things, and then after, either I go on a trip or we go on vacation, or I don't know, I don't feel like it. Getting back into like keeping up with that routine is difficult for me. So I would love to overcome that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something. Yeah.
All right. So as far as your health, things or actions that you do have that you want to keep. Awesome.
So the fact that I keep picking it back up and keep trying.
Not giving up. Things or actions that I don't have as far as my health and I don't want it.
Diabetes.
Yeah. Fair enough. Survey says. Last question. Things or actions that I do have that I don't want as far as my health.
I would say I really love wine, and I probably like it too much. I'm just going to leave that there.
Good to know.
Yeah.
So you've shared so many great stories and life lessons with everyone. What is there anything that we didn't say or that you want to make sure people leave with, just as far as takeaways from you?
I think the one thing I want to say, and something I've been thinking about a lot, is, who you are as a young, and not that I'm old, but who you are when you start out, so far from who you're going to be at every step of your life. And I'm not done. Like, we're always evolving. And I think the one thing that I would say to people, and I'm going to quote, Winnie the Pooh here, is that you're stronger. And I'm not going to say it right because I can't remember things, which is why I got so mad at that audit professor. I don't memorize things well. That you're stronger than you are. You're kinder than you are. You're amazing. Like, every person has gifts that they bring to this world that they don't acknowledge within themselves, and they really just need to be kinder to themselves. Mm-hmm. And my sister once told me, when you reach a certain point in your life where you're older and you're looking back and reflecting on your childhood, whatever your path, it's okay to stop and give that person that you were a hug. In fact, mm-hmm. It's important to visualize that, to actually give yourself a hug and say, that was a really tough time, or that was a really exciting time, or I was really proud of you. But to acknowledge that all the little things that have happened throughout your life happened. And that's really, to me, is the key to really understanding self-love. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what I want for everybody, is that everyone's worthy of love. And, you owe it to yourself to give every piece of you that hug.
Yeah, love that. Very sweet. What a great ending. I hug you back. Thank you so much for sharing your story today. And I'm sure so many people are going to walk away very inspired.
Oh, well, thanks, Amy. This has been super fun. So thanks for having me.
And now for my mindful moments with my interview with Heather. And hopefully you all enjoyed her story. I thought it was so inspiring and loved hearing about her family background, with her mom pivoting so many times in her career from having a food store to becoming an accountant later in life and then moving on to marine biology. It just shows that we literally can never stop learning. It's our zest for learning and not staying stagnant that helps us to constantly keep our brains working and be innovative. And then talking about her father, who would design and construct restaurants, and how they designed the menu and thought through all of that so that those would be successful, as well as what she learned from her father with her trips over the summer to be with her dad and really learn from him how to live in the outdoors and take risks. So many great stories that you can tell had such an influence on Heather throughout her life. And so she talked about that she really grew up being a dreamer and had this artistic family or just adults that were going after their dreams, which created that herself of wanting to be an actress and really working toward that as she was younger, and found that it was really hard to go through the rejection of being an actress. And looking at her mother and how she had pivoted when things weren't working out with her business, Heather did the same thing and started to go back and really try to find jobs that would give her a more stable life. And that's what really unlocked interest in her that she didn't even know she had. And we really had that discussion on, we can have this perceived notion of what we think we want in life or what our goal is. And, we really just have to constantly be aware of the things that excite us, the things that inspire us or that we take interest in, that I know I find all of the time in my life that there's things that I thought I would never do or never like. And then I try it and I'm like, maybe it is something that I would be interested in doing or never thought of or never pictured that would be something I would do in my life. So I think that lesson of just never closing yourself off from trying new things and really exploring, we're never too old. It's always a time to look at that within ourselves. And so we talked about the fact that she really started uncovering that she had this same interest that our mom did. She really understood databases and how all the numbers work together. And she started working for her mom when she became a pro advisor, and then went back to college so that she could become an accountant and actually become eventually a CPA. And so one of the things that I think was really important there was to just see that she could constantly evolve and have the faith in herself to pivot, to change, and go after a new dream, even if it wasn't the original dream. That is all the journey that we go through. And so once her mom sold her practice, she started her own practice and passed the CPA exam, but was missing the education requirement, which I loved that she went back still 15 years later after she did her master's program and was able to still get her license through, even though she didn't do the education requirements at the time. And that's, to me, a big lesson, is that sometimes our dreams get put on hold, or something that we plan for gets put on hold, but it doesn't mean that it has to be the end. It just means that it's on hold for a moment because other life situations come up that might get in the way of it happening just as we planned it. But to always come back to those things that we wanted so badly so that we can accomplish those things and not forget about them. So maybe ask yourself that question from today's interview is, what is it that maybe you put on hold that you want to go back to? And find a way that you can make that realistic in your life today. So maybe it doesn't look exactly the way that it looked when you originally thought about it, but it is something to consider, is how do you bring that back into your life? And so I asked her, what are some lessons that she learned from her mom? And one of them was learning to never take anything at face value and always understand the why. And I think for consultants out there, this is a really big thing, is so many times people will come to you as a consultant to tell you what their issues are. But as you question, as you learn, as you get into it, you realize that there's so many layers underneath what that person is actually saying, that to really understand how to help them. And then the other thing that she learned was how to have empathy for your clients and really care about their situation and put yourself in their shoes. And this is really something that in anything, whether you work in a corporation and you have other staff people or coworkers, or you serve other departments, how can you put yourself in their shoes so that you really understand what they're going through on a daily basis and can help them? And I loved her answer about accountants being unsung heroes, that, you know, for so many of us that are accountants, we understand this, but the clients don't see it, that they're getting whatever, you know, final reports or returns or whatever it is that you're finishing up for them, but they don't understand how much time goes into thinking through issues or problems that arise and so forth, because all they see is when they hear or talk to you or get an official report from you. So sharing that with them is so important so that they know that you care and that it matters to them, their well-being. So I thought that was a really good thing to note. And then she talked about her father, of the lesson that she learned from her father of how many risks he made her take, which, you know, she remembers as a kid being terrified. But as she's gone through her adulthood, it's given her vision, the notion that she can do it, that she's been put in so many situations that were risky, but she can overcome it, that she'll get through it, that she'll survive because of the many times that she was put in those situations with her father. So I want to thank Heather so much for being on. And, you know, when she ended, she really talked about that we are all stronger and kinder than we think we might be, or that's underneath. And what is important is to really be kind to ourselves over this journey, that sometimes we get hard on ourselves when things don't necessarily work out exactly the way that we had planned. But it is exactly the lessons that we need to learn to become better for ourselves and for the people around us. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. I hope you will take a moment to pause before entering back into your day to reflect on this podcast and note 1 to 2 actions you are inspired to do from today's conversation that you could incorporate into your life. To read the full blog and listen back to this episode or any other, you can find them at www.amyvetter.com/Breaking Beliefs podcast and related videos on my YouTube channel. For daily inspiration, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Amy Vetter CPA. I hope that you will choose to like this and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and more, so that you can join us for more inspiration on our next episode.